You've seen the shows. You've heard the theories. A mysterious race of alien giants from a lost planet called Nibiru. They came down to Earth thousands of years ago, genetically engineered humanity to be a slave race to mine gold, and left clues to their technology in our most ancient monuments. The modern story of the Anunnaki is an epic blockbuster. There's just one tiny problem. It's a lie. The people who supposedly wrote this story, the ancient Sumerians, never said any of it. For decades, a narrative spun in TV studios and sensational books has completely hijacked the truth. However, the real story isn't lost. It's just locked away in ancient clay tablets that are over 5,000 years old. Today, we're not just questioning the theory, we're putting it on trial. We're opening the original case file to separate history from fantasy and gods from aliens. This is what the ancient texts really say about the Anunnaki. Before we uncover the truth, we must understand the lie. The story of the Anunnaki as alien visitors isn't an ancient one. It's a product of the 20th century, born from the minds of a couple of charismatic authors who captured the public's imagination. The whole thing kicked off in 1968 with a Swiss hotel manager named Erich von Däniken. His book, Chariots of the Gods, became a global sensation. Von Däniken's main idea was electrifying. What if ancient people weren't as primitive as we thought? What if their greatest achievements, the pyramids, Stonehenge, the Nazca lines, weren't just the result of human work, but were built with help from extraterrestrial visitors? He argued that ancient religion started from a big misunderstanding. Early humans, he claimed, saw the technology of these ancient astronauts, and, with no other way to explain it, just worshipped them as gods. Their spaceships became chariots, their laser weapons were lightning bolts, and the visitors themselves became the gods of our oldest religions. Von Däniken laid the groundwork for what became known as the ancient astronaut theory. But the person most responsible for making Anunnaki the star of this show is Zecharia Sitchin. Starting in 1976 with his book The 12th Planet, Sitchin, a Russian-American author and amateur archaeologist, laid out a story that was way more detailed than von Däniken's. He claimed to have a special ability to translate ancient Sumerian cuneiform, the world's first written language system. And according to him, these tablets told an unbelievable story. He claimed the Anunnaki were from a planet called Nibiru, a supposed 12th planet in our solar system, with a massive 3,600-year orbit. These Anunnaki, Sitchin said, came to Earth about 450,000 years ago to do one thing: mine gold. And why gold? Sitchin's theory was that Nibiru's atmosphere was falling apart, and the Anunnaki needed gold dust to spray into their air to fix it. The story gets even wilder. The Anunnaki miners on Earth eventually got sick of all the hard labor. So, in a wild act of cosmic bioengineering, they decided to create a worker race. Sitchin claimed that Anunnaki scientists, led by a figure named Enki, took the DNA of a local hominid, Homo erectus, and mixed it with their own to create us, Homo sapiens. We were made, in his version, to be their slaves. It's an incredibly compelling story. It seems to answer some of our biggest questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? And it wraps it all up in a neat package of science fiction, mystery, and conspiracy. Sitchin's books sold millions of copies and have been translated into over 25 languages. His ideas, mixed with von Däniken's, are the foundation for countless TV shows, websites, and a belief system that's still going strong today. They present all of this as fact, as a direct translation of what the Sumerians themselves wrote. But here's the central question we have to investigate. Is this story really what the tablets say? Or is it just a case of mistranslation, misinterpretation, and maybe a little wishful thinking. To find out, we have to go to the source. We need to dust off the actual case files, the cuneiform tablets themselves, and see what the real evidence says. To debunk a myth, you have to start with reality. The world of the Anunnaki wasn't some sci-fi landscape with spaceships and lasers. It was ancient Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, in what is now modern-day Iraq. This area is often called the cradle of civilization, and for very good reason. Starting around 4500 BCE, the people we know as the Sumerians began to build the world's first real cities, Uruk, Ur, and Eridu. These weren't just a bunch of primitive huts. They were complex cities with massive buildings, amazing irrigation systems that turned dry land into fertile farms, and complicated social structures. The Sumerians invented the wheel, the plow, and, maybe most importantly, they invented time as we know it, dividing days into 24 hours and hours into 60 minutes. Then, around 3200 BCE, they did something that changed human history forever. They invented writing. It's called cuneiform, a script made by pressing a reed into wet clay tablets. We've found hundreds of thousands of these tablets. They record everything from how much grain was in storage and what the laws were, to epic poems and, most importantly for us, their myths and religious beliefs. The Sumerian civilization eventually gave way to others in the same area, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, and the Assyrians. And while these cultures had their languages and customs, they pretty much adopted and adapted the myths and the gods they got from the Sumerians. So when we talk about the Anunnaki, we're talking about a group of gods whose stories were told and retold for 3,000 years, changing a little with each culture. This is a significant point that the ancient alien theory overlooks. It treats these texts like a single, unchanging historical report of alien visitors. But these were religious texts. They were how ancient people tried to make sense of the world. They explained things like the sunrise, the flooding of rivers, and the changing seasons through the actions of powerful, divine beings. Their gods weren't astronauts. They were the personification of nature, of human feelings, and of cosmic forces. They had personalities, complicated family drama, and very human-like flaws. They got jealous, they were proud, they fell in love, and they got angry. These stories were never meant to be read as literal history. They were mythology, and like all mythology, they were full of symbolism and metaphor. Taking them literally is like reading Greek myths and deciding that a real winged horse named Pegasus actually lived on Mount Olympus. You're kind of missing the whole point. So, let's approach these texts as they were meant to be read. Let's step into the mythological world of ancient Mesopotamia. The case file is open. And the first question we have to ask is, if the Anunnaki weren't aliens, then who were they? The word Anunnaki is thrown around constantly on TV, almost always defined as those who came from heaven to earth. This translation, made popular by Zecharia Sitchin, is the foundation of the whole ancient alien theory. The problem is, it's wrong. Actual Sumerian scholars, the linguists and historians who've dedicated their lives to this stuff, have a different translation. The name is generally understood to mean princely seed or princely offspring. This points directly to who they were, not visitors from another planet, but the children of the head god of the Sumerian pantheon, An, the god of the sky. Simply put, the Anunnaki are a group of deities. They weren't a single race of aliens, they were a class of gods, kind of like the divine ruling council of Mesopotamia. In the earliest texts, the term referred to the most powerful gods, the descendants of the sky god An and the earth goddess Kai. This group included the heavy hitters of the religion: An, Enlil, Enki, Ninhursag, Nana, Utu, and Inanna. The number of Anunnaki isn't consistent, which makes sense for a belief system that lasted for thousands of years. Sometimes there are 7. One text talks about the 50 Anunna of Eridu. The later Babylonian creation story, the Enuma Elish, says there were 600 Anunnaki, with 300 in the heavens and 300 on the earth. This isn't a sign of confused eyewitnesses. It's just the natural evolution of a religious idea over time. Their job also changed depending on the time and culture. But one of their main roles, especially early on, was to decree the fates of mankind. They were the divine assembly that made the big decisions affecting the human world. They were not, as Sitchin claimed, a crew of interplanetary gold miners. Let's meet the key players on this divine council, because their personalities are key to understanding the real myths. First, there's An, or Anu in the Akkadian language. He's the Sky Father, the ancestor of all the gods. He was technically the top god, living up in the heavens. But, like a lot of supreme sky gods in other mythologies, he was often a distant figure who didn't get involved in the daily drama of gods or humans. The real power on Earth was held by his sons. The most important of these was Enlil. His name means Lord of the Wind. For a long time, he was the chief god of the Sumerian pantheon. Unlike his dad, Enlil was an active and often explosive force. He was the enforcer. Think of him as the powerful, authoritative, and quick-to-anger chairman of the board. It's Enlil who gets annoyed by the noise of humanity and decides to wipe them out with a great flood, a story we'll get to in a bit. And then there's Enki, who the Babylonians called Ea. His name means Lord of the Earth, but he was mainly the god of wisdom, magic, and the fresh water that was believed to exist under the ground. While Enlil was angry and impulsive, Enki was clever, cunning, and usually a friend to humanity. He's a creator god, a problem solver, and a trickster who often pushes back against his brother Enlil's harsher ideas. In the flood myth, it's Enki who secretly warns a human to build a boat and save mankind. It is Enki who is involved in creating humans, not as a genetic scientist making a slave race, but as a wise god solving a problem for the other gods. These 3, An, Enlil, and Enki, were the main trio. They were joined by other powerful Anunnaki gods, like Inanna, the goddess of love and war, and Utu, the sun god. These gods weren't described as physical beings in metal suits. They were often connected to planets and forces of nature. Their splendor was described as Milam, a supernatural, terrifying aura that radiated from them, inspiring awe and fear. Over time, their role shifted. In later Babylonian and Assyrian texts, the Anunnaki became more associated with the underworld, serving as the judges of the dead. This evolution is a fascinating part of religious history, but it has nothing to do with aliens leaving the planet. So the first part of our investigation is closed. The identity of the Anunnaki is not a mystery, they were gods. But the ancient alien theory doesn't just get their identity wrong, it twists their stories. Now we have to look at the specific crimes they're accused of, creating humanity for slave labor and the Great Flood conspiracy. It's time to analyze the key texts Sitchin claimed as his proof. The heart of the Anunnaki alien theory relies on a few key Mesopotamian myths that have been twisted to fit the story of aliens. The 2 most important events are the creation of humanity and the Great Flood. When we look at what the tablets actually say in their proper context, we can see exactly how the story got bent out of shape. Let's start with the creation of humankind. According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki created us by genetically engineering a primitive hominid to be a slave race for mining gold. It's a dramatic story, It's also completely made up. The most detailed Mesopotamian story of our creation comes from a text called the Atrahasis epic. The story doesn't start with a need for gold. It starts with a labor dispute between two classes of gods. In the beginning, before humans, all the hard work of keeping the universe running, digging canals, farming the land, was done by a group of lesser gods called the Igigi. The Anunnaki were the senior gods, the managers. The Atrahasis epic starts with the Igigi getting fed up with their back-breaking work. They burn their tools and surround the house of the head god, Enlil, demanding a break. The gods have a crisis on their hands. All work has stopped. Enlil is furious, but the wise Enki has a different idea. He suggests creating a new being to take over the work. He says, "Create a human being, that he bear the yoke. Let a man assume the drudgery of the god." So yes, humanity was created to be laborers. On that one tiny point, Sitchin's version has a sliver of truth, but they were created to do the work of the junior gods, not to be gold-mining slaves for aliens. The motive is completely different. It's a mythological story that explains why life is so hard. The idea is that our lives are full of toil because we were made to do the hard work the gods themselves didn't want to do. The creation process itself is also pure myth, not science. There's no mention of DNA splicing or labs. The mother goddess, Nintu, is given the job. She mixes clay with the flesh and blood of a sacrificed god, a god who had intelligence, to give us a divine spark. The great gods then spit on the clay, and from this mix, the first humans are made. The story is symbolic. It explains our dual nature. We are made from humble clay, but we have a spark of divine intelligence inside us. Now, let's look at the second big pillar of the alien theory. In the modern myth, the flood is caused by Nibiru's gravity, making Antarctica's ice sheet slip into the ocean. Enlil wants to let humanity die, but Enki, the good guy alien, saves his favorite human. The real story is found in both the Atrahasis and the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. And once again, the motive is completely different. The real story is found in both the Atrahasis and the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. After humans were created, they started multiplying a lot. They became too numerous and way too noisy. The text says the land became loud like bellowing cattle, and the chief god Enlil couldn't get any sleep because of all the racket. Annoyed by this noise pollution, Enlil decides to send a series of disasters, plagues, droughts, and famines to thin the herd. Each time, though, the clever Enki tells his favorite human, Atrahasis, how to stop the disaster, and humanity is saved. Finally, a frustrated Enlil decides on a permanent solution, a great flood to wipe everyone out. He makes all the Anunnaki gods swear an oath not to tell anyone. But Enki, being Enki, finds a loophole. He goes to the reed hut where Atrahasis lives and speaks to the wall, knowing full well that Atrahasis is listening on the other side. He warns him about the flood and tells him to tear down his house, build a boat, and save his family and a bunch of animals. The flood comes, and humanity is nearly wiped out. But the gods soon realize they have a problem. With no humans left to work the fields and make sacrifices, the gods themselves start to starve. When the waters finally go down, and they see Atrahasis get off his boat and make a sacrifice, the hungry gods gathered like flies around the offering. Enlil is furious that a human survived, but Enki convinces him that his plan is a bit too extreme. They agree to let humanity continue, but they introduce things like infant mortality and infertility to keep the population in check. This is not a story about planetary physics or an alien civil war. It's a powerful myth about the relationship between gods and humans. It's about divine anger, the fragility of life, and the value of wisdom. By stripping these stories of their mythological meaning, the ancient alien theory commits a huge interpretive crime. It takes a rich, symbolic story about the human condition and turns it into a flat, literal report about aliens. The investigation is done. The evidence has been looked at. It's time for the verdict. The theory that the Anunnaki were ancient astronauts from Nibiru who engineered humanity to mine gold is one of the most successful works of modern fiction. It's a great story, but it has no basis in historical or archaeological fact. The scholarly community, the Assyriologists, Sumerologists, and historians who are the actual experts, overwhelmingly reject these claims as pseudoscience. Let's quickly recap the 5 key points that take apart the ancient alien narrative. First, the Anunnaki are always described as gods in the ancient texts. They are the princely offspring of the sky god, not visitors from another planet. Their names and roles change over 3,000 years, but their status as gods in a religion never does. Second, there is zero credible physical evidence of alien contact in Mesopotamia. We found their temples, their idols, and hundreds of thousands of their clay tablets. We have not found a single microchip, a piece of a spaceship, or anything else that doesn't belong. The incredible achievements of the Sumerians, like writing and cities, are well documented as the result of human development over time. Third, the ancient alien theory is a modern invention. The whole idea comes from 20th century authors like Erich von Däniken and Zechariah Sitchin. They created this story by mistranslating, misinterpreting, and taking ancient texts completely out of context. Sitchin's translation of Anunnaki, his claims about Nibiru, and his gold mining story are all rejected by scholars because there are no texts that actually say what he claims they say. Fourth, the themes in these myths, like creation stories and great floods, are not evidence of a single alien event. These are common archetypes found in cultures all over the world. This is much better explained by shared human psychology and our universal fascination with the sky and nature, not by a shared memory of an alien visit. And fifth, trying to link the Anunnaki to figures in other texts, like the Nephilim in the Bible, is pure speculation. The Anunnaki are unique to Mesopotamia. The Nephilim are part of a completely separate religious tradition. Mashing them together is a modern game of connect the dots, not real history. The verdict is clear. The case is closed. The Anunnaki were not aliens. They were the gods of the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. They were beings of myth and religion, born from our desire to understand the world and our place in it. So why does any of this matter? Why spend time debunking a story that so many people find entertaining? Because the ancient people of Mesopotamia weren't just characters in a sci-fi blockbuster. They were incredibly intelligent and sophisticated people who built the world's first cities, developed the first laws, and wrote the first stories. Their mythology is one of the great achievements of human history. To replace their rich, complex, and symbolic worldview with a simple tale of aliens and gold is to do them a huge disservice. It silences their actual voices, which we can still hear today through the marks they pressed into clay 5,000 years ago. It robs them of their legacy. The popularity of the ancient alien theory tells us more about ourselves than it does about our past. It shows a desire for simple answers to big questions, a love of mystery, and maybe a hope that we aren't alone in the universe. But the search for wonder shouldn't come at the cost of the truth. The real story of the Anunnaki, the story of powerful gods, divine battles, creation, and destruction, is just as epic, just as dramatic, and way more meaningful than any modern sci-fi invention.